Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or The Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be going in depth into my week number 12 top waiver wire ads. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help us out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFNTSY. And if you have any questions about week number 12, please ask down below in the comment section or in the Discord linked in the pinned comment and in the video description. Today's video is brought to you guys by BetMGM. We're going to be talking about them a little bit later. They have a great deal for you. So without further ado, let's get in to today's week number 12 waiver wire ads. We begin with the running back waiver wire ads headlined by Latavius Murray, running back of the Denver Broncos, going up against the Carolina Panthers in Carolina this week. Murray is currently owned in 23% of leagues on Yahoo Fantasy. So if you play on ESPN, CBS, NFL, any of those other fantasy football platforms, then the ownership percentage is going to be slightly different. Though I will note in some cases there might be a drastic difference in ownership percentage depending on which website you play on. So Latavius Murray last week with Melvin Gordon, with him was the running back number 11 in half PPR. The Broncos snap count in that game was Latavius Murray 31, Melvin Gordon 28. And just a little bit ago, the Denver Broncos released Melvin Gordon and Chase Edmonds suffered a high ankle sprain. So now the only running backs they have on their team that can actually start of note are Latavius Murray and Marlon Mack. Now, I don't necessarily think that Marlon Mack is some schlub who's not going to see any touches, but I do genuinely think now that Latavius Murray may have just became the workhorse running back on the Denver Broncos. Now, obviously, if we were going into the season thinking Latavius Murray was going to be the workhorse running back for the Denver Broncos, which would have been impossible because he wasn't on the Broncos to start the year, you probably would have had a wet dream. But at the end of the day, now we're in week number 12, and the Denver Broncos offense, headed by Russell Wilson, is complete and utter dick. But at the end of the day, even with the offense not being that great, Latavius Murray could still be very good for fantasy football because his schedule going forward is very positive. Last week up against the Raiders, 17 rushes for 49 yards and a score, 4 receptions on 4 targets, going 4 for 4 like he was at Wendy's for 23 yards. I genuinely believe that this spot Latavius Murray is in now without Melvin Gordon could mean that Latavius Murray could be a league winning running back this year. At number 2, we have Samaje Perine of the Cincinnati Bengals going up against the Tennessee Titans in Tennessee, currently owned in 8% of leagues. Last week, he was the RB number 2 in half PPR. Now, it is important to note that this video is being recorded prior to Monday Night Football tonight on Monday. So if you're watching this after and now Samaje Perine is the RB3 because Christian McCaffrey went crazy and became the RB1, then that's why, because it was recorded before Monday Night Football. Week 11 at the Pittsburgh Steelers, Samaje Perine had 11 rushes for 30 yards, 4 receptions on 4 targets for 52 yards, and not 1, not 2, but 3 total touchdowns in that game. Joe Mixon exited the game with a concussion. Now, he could definitely return this week up against the Titans. Right now on Monday, he is in the concussion protocol, but with how safe these teams have tried to be after that Tua injury that happened up against the Bengals, it would not surprise me at all if Joe Mixon missed this spot up against the Titans. Now, I'm not saying that's a lock to happen. We don't know if he's going to end up playing or not, but if he ends up missing, even up against a pretty tough Tennessee Titans run defense, I still think Samaje Perine is a guy that you would want to throw into your lineup. And obviously, if you're someone who has Joe Mixon on their team, you better run to the waiver wire and pick up Samaje Perine. At number 3, the first 2 running backs look really solid, especially Latavius Murray. I mean, this guy could be a league-winning running back. Samaje Perine, if Joe Mixon misses, that's a really good spot. But outside of those 2, we are kind of grasping here to try to find someone else that we could potentially play. At number 3, we have Rashad with 2 A's White, running back of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, going up against the Cleveland Browns in Cleveland, currently owned in 61% of leagues. Now, Greg Allman of The Athletic reported that he believes that Rashad White will retain the Bucs starting role coming out of the bye. Now, we shall see about that. Will it be Uncle Lenny or will it be Rashad White? Now, if you look all the way back to week number 10 in Munich in Germany, the last game the Buccaneers played because they were on bye last week. He was the running back 17 in that matchup, having 22 carries for 105 yards. And before Uncle Lenny Fournette ended up getting hurt, here were the touches of the running backs. Fournette had 14, Rachaad White had 11. So it's not really that out of the ordinary. It wouldn't be that fucking strange if Rachaad White became the lead back on the Buccaneers. Again, I'm not telling you this is a lock to happen, but this is another player that I want to pick up. And now running backs 4 and 5, these guys are just deep shot dart throws from the moon. If you've ever seen that Stephen Curry picture where it's like he could shoot from anywhere, even the moon, and he's shooting a 3 on the moon down to earth. That's basically the shot you're taking on these other two guys. James Cook, running back of the Buffalo Bills, going up against the Detroit Lions in Detroit on Thanksgiving. 17% owned for James Cook, running back number 22 in half PPR last week in that matchup up against the Cleveland Browns. He had 11 rushes for 86 yards as well as 2 targets, didn't result in any receptions. I still do not understand. There is not one iota of understanding that I have about why the fuck the Buffalo Bills brought in Nyheim Hines. Why would you trade for Nyheim Hines? I know, Nick wasn't like a high round pick. I get it. But why are you bringing in Nyheim Hines if you have James Cook? And now magically, once Nyheim Hines is on the roster, now you decide that, oh shit, now we should give James Cook some more touches. It makes no fucking sense. James Cook has been pretty decent all season long. And yes, I do understand Singletary is the guy. He played 72.6% of the snaps last week in the rout of the Cleveland Browns. And James Cook only played 25.8%. But with how Cook has played, and especially how good he looked last week up against the Cleveland Browns, and with how much more it appears the Buffalo Bills want to jam the football down the throat of the defense, I genuinely think that James Cook has some untapped upside that he might unleash down the stretch of the season. At number 5, we have Cam Akers, running back of the LA Rams, going up against the Kansas City Chiefs in Kansas City. 27% owned on Yahoo. Entering into the season, I'm sure there's a lot of people that thought it would be the Rams versus the Chiefs Super Bowl this year. And that was very wrong because, well, the Chiefs might make it, but the Rams are an absolute fucking disaster, a complete and utter dumpster fire. Despite Kyren Williams playing 67.7% of the snaps and Akers only playing 38.7%, Akers, to me, looked like the better player. Now, Akers was the RB 31 in half PPR last week up against the New Orleans Saints in New Orleans. 14 rushes for 61 yards. So again, I'm not saying to blow all your fab money, throw it, make it rain like you're at the strip club in terms of your fab bucks. You don't have to do that on Cam Akers, but I do think if you're in a deeper league, he might be worth a shot. Now we pivot to the wide receiver position, headlined by Treylon Burks, wide receiver of the LA Titans, going up against the Cincinnati Bengals this week, currently owned in 20% of leagues on Yahoo Fantasy. But before we could break down Treylon Burks and the rest of the wide receivers, then the quarterbacks, then the tight ends, I would like to give you guys a quick word from our friends and our sponsor over at BetMGM. Now, BetMGM, if you're a brand new user to their site, make sure you click on the link in the video description down below or in the pinned comment because they have an offer that is legitimate free money. If you bet $10 on any World Cup game, the bet doesn't even have to win. If someone scores a goal in the rest of the World Cup, then you will receive $200 in free bets. Doesn't even have to be in your game. There could be 0 goals in your game, and some other game could have 1 goal, and you get $200 in free bets. So we're going to navigate right now on your screen. You're going to see BetMGM at the top of the screen. You're going to navigate to the soccer tab. Then you're going to scroll down a little bit and then find literally any game you want. You bet $10 on it, and you will win $200 in free bets if anyone scores a goal. So you are guaranteed to get $200 in free bets. Your bet doesn't even have to win. You could bet on a team, they could get absolutely annihilated, and you're still going to get your $200 in free bets. So make sure you guys do check that out. Link in the video description down below, as well in the pinned comment. Again, you do have to be a new user to BetMGM, but please make sure you guys do go ahead and check that out. Back on into things, we move back to Treylon Burks, who last week was the wide receiver number 10 in half PPR, tied with DPJ, Donovan Peoples-Jones. Week 11 at the Green Bay Packers in Lambeau Field. Cold, hard nipple weather, honestly, in Green Bay. It was cold as fuck. 7 receptions on 8 targets for 111 yards, 111 yards. Back-to-back games with at least 6 targets, and it appears very clearly that Treylon Burks is the numero uno wide receiver, the number 1 option at the wide receiver position on this team. Last week, he had a 29.6% target share and a 41.8% air yards share. I personally was someone that was banging the drum all offseason on my knees, giving this guy the metaphorical gawk gawk 9,000, talking up Treylon Burks. And now, it only took fucking 10 weeks of the season, but he's finally looking good. Week 11, I like him up against the Bengals, and I genuinely think that based upon what I saw last week up against the Packers, this guy is going to be a start-worthy player game in and game out. As long as Ryan Tannehill's starting, if Malik Willis is under center, then everything will probably end up going to shit. Next up, we got DPJ, Donovan Peoples-Jones, wide receiver of the Cleveland Browns, going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at home in Cleveland, 45% owned for Donovan Peoples-Jones, wide receiver number 10 in half PPR last week, tied with, you guessed it, Treylon Burks. Week 11 at Buffalo, technically not at Buffalo, in Detroit. 5 receptions on 6 targets for 61 yards and a touchdown. 3 straight games for DPJ of over 10 half PPR points since week 4 in 7 games. In 6 out of those 7 games, he has had over 5 targets. Things may get even more spicy. Things may get even better once Deshaun Watson comes back. And I've been saying once Deshaun Watson comes back for a while. But now that's no longer some distant thing out in the future. Deshaun Watson is playing next fucking week in week number 11 up against the Texans. And that might increase Donovan Peoples-Jones's upside even more. He's already an incredibly safe player, and now maybe the floor increases, and so does the ceiling. Donovan Peoples-Jones, I've been talking about him for the last couple of weeks. Right now, you got to get him because after this week, maybe he doesn't do the best against the Bucs, right? The Bucs defense is pretty solid, but once Deshaun Watson comes back, people are going to really key in on DPJ in next week's waiver wire, so make sure you get him before it's loads a bit too late. At number 3, we move to Paris Campbell, wide receiver of the Indianapolis Colts, going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers at home in Indianapolis. 40% owned, was the wide receiver number 30 in half PPR last week. Ultimately, they lost to the Eagles, but that game was incredibly tight. That game was tight all game long. In my head, I'm like, holy shit, is Jeff Saturday like a genius or something? Like, how are they playing this close to the Eagles? The spread, I think, was like 8.5 or something. Maybe that could be wrong. Might be entirely wrong, but I feel like the Eagles were big favorites going into that game. I think they were, and the Colts just stayed in. They made it a dogfight. Luckily, they didn't invite Mike Vick, and it was very exciting to watch. Very exciting to watch. In that game, Campbell didn't do the best, but he was still targeted heavily by Matt Ryan, which was the narrative entering into the game. 5 receptions on 6 targets with 67 yards. And we're going to go ahead and explore that narrative, open the legs of the narrative, and look into it. Week 11. So these are the last 4 games with Matt Ryan under center. Week 11, 9.2 half PPR points for Paris Campbell. Week 10, 17.1. Then obviously there's a gap because Matt Ryan was benched for Sam Ehlinger. Week 7, 18 fantasy points. Week 6, 15.2. Paris Campbell is legit. He's legit. Now, the Steelers' defense did not look good last week up against the Cincinnati Bengals, but I think their defense is better than that, so I think they're going to give the Colts some problems. But ultimately, even though Michael Pittman Jr. is an incredibly gifted player, way better than Paris Campbell, it appears that Matt Ryan loves Paris Campbell, so he's got to be high up in the wide receiver pickup rankings. At number 4, we move to Darius Slayton, wide receiver of the New York Football Giants, going up against the Dallas Cowboys on Thanksgiving, 51% owned. And the Giants are on a downward spiral, potentially out of the playoffs. They are holding on to every win they had and are trying to crawl their way into the playoffs. Sadly for Giants fans, I think the Dallas Cowboys are going to beat the ever-living shit out of the Giants on national TV, so everyone's grandma gets to see it as well. Darius Slayton, though, is the only fucker to throw the ball to because Wan'Dale Robinson is now done for the season, and now they have all these other receivers around Darius Slayton that sound like people that were creative players in Madden. You know when you sim your franchise in Madden? You're like 5 years down the road and your team is filled with just random names. That's what the names sound like of the people that are on the team with Darius Slayton that aren't Darius Slayton at the wide receiver position. Last week, up against the Detroit Lions at home in MetLife in a terrible loss, wide receiver 18, Daniel Jones turned into fucking Stevie Wonder in the pocket. Week 11 versus Detroit, 5 receptions on 10 targets for 86 yards. This is now 4 solid games in a row. And again, without Wan'Dale Robinson, the rock's got to go to someone, and his name is Darius Slayton. Closing in on my wide receivers to add on the week, we have number 5, Jameson Williams, wide receiver of the Detroit Lions, going up against the Buffalo Bills. No one circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills on Thanksgiving, though we're not going to be seeing Jameson Williams this week, most likely. Most likely, everything I've read says there's basically no shot that Jameson Williams plays, but he returned to practice today on Monday, which is very positive towards him being active very, very soon. And despite this guy being one of the most talented wide receivers in the 2022 NFL draft, and despite me banging the drum for Jameson Williams over the last couple of weeks, telling you guys to add him before it's too late, before he gets activated, he's only owned in 22% of leagues. 22% of leagues. That's fucking unbelievable with how talented of a player Jameson Williams is, with how good of an offense the Lions have. This could be a recipe like the Powerpuff Girls. Sugar, spice, and everything nice for Jameson Williams. Now we pivot to the tight end position. Just kidding, the quarterback position. Then we get the tight end position right at the end. We always keep the tight end for the last spot here. Trevor Lawrence, quarterback of the Jacksonville Jaguars, going up against the Baltimore Ravens at home in Jacksonville, currently owned in 59% of leagues. Now, the Jacksonville Jaguars, as well as funny as fuck, all of Florida was on bye in week number 11. The Bucs, the Jags, and the Dolphins. So we got to go ahead and hop on in that time machine. Marty McFly, go back to week number 10 at Kansas City. Quarterback 6 for Lawrence. 29 completions on 40 attempts for 259 yards and 2 scores. 4 rushes for 26 yards. Trevor Lawrence has had some really good games this season. He's had some games that are like, and I talked about this in the other waiver wire video I do on the Stochastic Fantasy Football channel, but it's really funny because there are some games where it's like, holy shit, this is why they drafted the guy number 1 overall. And then there's other games where you're like, oh, this is why maybe he needs more time, right? There's some games where he doesn't really look good, but he's had 2 solid games in a row. The Ravens defense really didn't look good at all up against the Carolina Panthers last week. But just the Panthers offense is so inept that it didn't even matter. So I think Trevor Lawrence will have a pretty decent game here. Between Lawrence and Mariota, I might end up flip-flopping by the end of the week, but these are really the 2 main options to stream this week. Right now, by the amount of yards by the amount of inches that Zach Wilson was averaging on Sunday, 2.2 inches per play. That's how much I have Trevor Lawrence ahead of Marcus Mariota right now. Marcus Mariota, quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons at number 2, going up against the Washington Commanders in Washington. 43% owned for Mariota, quarterback 13 in week number 11, up against the Chicago Bears at home in Atlanta. 13 completions on 20 attempts for 131 yards and a tug. 13 rushes for 25 yards and another tug. 2 tugs in one game. You want to know who else wants tugs? The guy I want to talk about after this, but Marcus Mariota. He's looked not the best, but he keeps putting up fantasy numbers. He throws interceptable balls. He does stupid shit, but he still always finishes as like a top 15 quarterback. I know the Commanders' defense looks good, but ultimately, even without Kyle Pitts, I think Mariota still gets it done because it's like Kyle Pitts wasn't even out there anyways when Mariota's playing quarterback. Final guy, Deshaun Watson, quarterback of the Browns, going up against whoever the hell they're playing up against this week, but it doesn't matter who they're playing this week because you can't use him this week. You can't use him because he is not eligible to play, still suspended. But He's 48% owned, and he will make his season debut week 13 next Sunday up against, you guessed it, the Houston Texans. Who could have wrote that story? Funny as fuck, right? Crazy how the NFL schedule works. If you don't have a quarterback that you trust, make sure you fucking sprint Usain Bolt style to the waiver wire and pick up Watson, because Watson has top 5 upside when healthy. Now, I'm not telling you he's going to hit the top 5 upside. He might not be able to hit that. But at the end of the day, you still have to try, because the other quarterbacks on the waiver wire are probably nowhere near as good of players as Deshaun Watson. Now we move to the tight end position to close things out. If you've enjoyed this far, smash that fucking like button like it owes you money. And make sure you leave a comment down below if you have any questions. And even if you don't have a question, just say, Nick, great job, you genius, or whatever you want to say. You know, Nick, you're a dumbass. You know, you could say that too. Whatever. Any type of comment helps boost the video up. So whatever you got, let me know. Greg Dulcich, tight end of the Denver Broncos, going up against the Carolina Panthers in Carolina, 61% owned. Last week up against, turn your volume down, the Las Vegas Raiders at home in Mile High. Greg Dulcich was the tight end 15, tied with Cole Kmet, 4 receptions on 5 targets for 30 yards. Not what I was hoping for, but he continues to be pretty mid every week, kind of reliable. Just going to have to keep ranking him as a top waiver wire ad, because the tight end position is a disaster. It's a dumpster fire. Number 2, we got Juwan Johnson, tight end of the New Orleans Saints at the 49ers, 30% owned in San Francisco. I talked about this last week. We need to put some respect on Juwan Johnson's name. Tight end 3.5 PPR last week. He's had 3 fucking games in a row where he scored a touchdown. Last week up against the Rams, 3 receptions on 4 targets for 47 yards. And would you guess it, a touchdown? That's how he gets to 3 games straight. I didn't see this coming at all. Juwan Johnson's looked incredible. Maybe when they go back to Jameis, if they ever do, Juwan Johnson's value might tank to the bottom of the fucking ocean, where you can see those messed up looking fish with like the, you know what I'm talking about? That picture of the fish where it has like a lantern in front of him or a light. Maybe that'll happen, but right now it's Andy Dalton, the Red Rifle, and Juwan Johnson's feasting like Ezekiel Elliott does on Thanksgiving. Final tight end ad. Now this is just, you know what I talked about earlier? I don't remember who I was talking about, but it was the Stephen Curry shot from the moon, the dart throw, the deep throw from fucking half court. Austin Hooper, tight end of the Tennessee Titans, the Le Titans, up against the Bungles in Tennessee, 12% owned. Tight end number 2.5 PPR last week. He had an amazing game up against the Cheeseheads, the Green Bay Packers in Green Bay. I sounded like a Scottish person. Green Bay? That was actually not the accent I was going for. 4 receptions on 4 targets. That was not a Scottish accent that I just did. On 4 targets for 36 yards and 2 tugs. Back-to-back games with over 4 targets. Kind of liking what Austin Hooper is cooking. So thank you guys all so much for watching. If you ended up enjoying today's video, please make sure you hit that like button and that subscribe button down below. I love you guys all so much. Make sure you check out our sponsor, BetMGM. Again, $200 in free bets, literally for free. You just bet $10 if anyone scores in the World Cup, which is guaranteed to happen. You get your $200 in free bets, then you can bet it on the NFL. Win some more money. So thank you guys all so much for watching. I love you guys all so much. I hope you guys are having a great rest of your guys' day. It's week 12, baby. Should be a solid game tonight. Niners versus Cardinals, even though Colt McCoy's under center. It is what it is. I love you guys all so much. I hope you all have a great rest of your guys' day. And as always, good boy.